Oh my God.
We go. Well, hello, my dear. How are you?
Oh, I am doing so wonderfully. I'm excited to get this week started, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm obsessed with your vibe and everything you do. So I think this community,
Oh,
especially because we've been talking a lot about like breakups and relationships and all this kind of stuff. And, I mean, I'll have you introduce yourself in a second, but just the whole aspect of pleasure, right? And stepping into that as your own unit. Right. Like not having it just be, oh, I can only have pleasure and sexuality and things like that if I'm in a union. I can actually use this. I know you use this with business growth. You use this as, self-leadership. You use this as a thing. And I'm obsessed with it so much. So I'm so excited. Before we jump in, I always like to start with a question. Currently in your life, what are you navigating your way through healing to happy? What is it? What is a real human moment that you're going through right now?
oh, I love this question. I think honestly, it's finding balance. So I'm growing my coaching business and I'm slowly bringing down other areas that I'm making income to focus on coaching. And at the same time balancing my dating life, balancing seeing my family. And life is in kind of one of those current states where it could feel really chaotic. It could feel really uncertain and unpredictable. And that's a place that can cause a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. And so it's been this beautiful practice in coming back to my tools, like coming back to that pleasure, being like, okay, how can I bring 5% more pleasure in? How can I slow this all down? Because how we experience time, how we exist through the chaos, we actually have a lot more control over that than we think. So I'm definitely kind of walking that line and being like, okay, let's just come back into me. And I would say that's really what I'm trying to navigate, especially when it comes to dating, because I'm having so much more fun than I have in my entire life. And I could spend so much time there if I wanted in the best way. Um, and it's noticing like where are my boundaries and just making sure I keep prioritizing myself through all of it.
I love that. And that's such a real moment too, because whether it's like dating or it's friendships or what have you, it's like, oh, but these are fun. And then you're like, I have also other things I need to do, but this feels so good and all my humanness, like the connection and the love and all that
Yes.
kind of stuff. I
And
feel.
like finding the humanness in the other things as well, like
Mhm.
within myself and in the business. So, yeah.
I love that one. Thank you for sharing that. So would you like to introduce yourself to lovely, lovely people in this community?
I would. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Sheila. I work as a women's empowerment and sexuality coach, and I am here to help people and especially to lead powerful women back to their pleasure, back to their sensuality, and reclaiming that part of ourselves that in so many areas of life has become so denigrated, so shamed, so put on the back burner. Whereas, really, this is where our vitality lies. This is where our creativity lies. This is that vibrancy, that vitality that we want. It lies in our sensuality. It lies in how we experience the world, which comes in through our senses, right? That's what I mean by sensuality. And when we reclaim that, we actually become present. We can deepen our connections. Life becomes more meaningful. Even something as simple as the leaves on the trees or how you walk, how you are present as you walk to your friend's house, how present you are with your friends. All of this comes back to how you are experiencing yourself through your sexuality, through your sensuality. And so to me, reclaiming that, it's a portal to healing.
Mm.
It's a portal to living the life of our desires because we're finally listening to ourselves. And that's what I'm here for. And I just believe that it gets to get better and better in how we feel. And I want everyone to join me.
You're so cute. I'm obsessed with it. You can even feel the energy just listening because it's so freaking true. Like this vulnerable moment, but it's like that was my roadblock, right? Like pleasure and leading with that, because that was something my mother was always just like, absolutely the fuck not. Like, we are not allowed to have that in the house. Here's the structure. Here's the thing. We're not allowed to, like, she wouldn't even let me wear Abercrombie because quote unquote only sluts wear Abercrombie. Like, it's that
Yeah.
whole kind of, don't be too in your body because that will trigger someone else's, I don't know, insecurities. And I remember feeling that. Like, if I saw someone like you, I don't even know, 5 years ago, I'd be like, they're so showy, they're so flashy, they're so those kind of things.
Yeah.
And then you sit there and you're like, wait, no, she's just really present. And that's so beautiful. And so what led you to that work? What helped you get over those? Because I feel like that's a very common roadblock thing. Like, what helped if you experienced that, but like what started you on this journey to get to this space of like this authentic life force that is pleasure?
Yeah, I think there's a couple key. I look back over my life, I'm like, oh, it was all leading me here, of course, as we all do, right? But I think really it started in my teens. I danced 30 hours a week. I was super awkward. Like I was such a goody two shoes and socially really awkward. But I had that connection to my body. Now, when I was 20, I went through a pretty violent sexual assault and I totally lost it. I developed PTSD and that total dissociation, total numbing out, developed a lot of pain in my womb space, and everything changed from that point. And so it wasn't until I was probably about 28 or so that I was like, okay, I hadn't had the relationships. Sex was painful. I was clearly pushing people away, and I had this moment of realizing I'm the common denominator between all these things not working. Like, I'm the only one in my life that is controlling this. And so I embarked on a journey and I hired a coach. I did so much healing work. I ended up in graduate school for sexual health studies. And kind of all these things put together, I've come to this place where the body work, especially realizing when you actually come back into your body, when you become present and tune into your senses, everything changes. I look like at the height of PTSD versus now, I moved through life and then it was like I was a observer from outside. Whereas now I'm in it and I feel it. And like I remember when my grandpa passed, feeling that grief, and that was into this healing work, feeling that grief so deeply and being absolutely just destroyed, but then noticing how beautiful it was to even be able to feel that and how much meaning that connection, that relationship was able to hold, how much more it was able to hold because I could feel it and I could be there and I could be present. And so the thing that really allowed me to go into this healing work, to go to the dark places, to actually look at that shadow, to look at the things that really hurt me, was pleasure. Because when we pair pleasure with the kind of dark healing work, we're teaching our nervous system that we're safe. Because if our body feels safe, if we're giving our body pleasure, then our mind feels safe. And I think that's something that's so often missed in this healing work, is this idea in therapy, like you go in, you go to the hard things, but it's like, wait, like, how do we allow our body to still feel okay and not get triggered and spiked all the freaking time? We do it with pleasure. We do it with sensuality. Honestly, it's similar to mindfulness, but with the lens of pleasure.
Mm.
So it's bringing in the presence to what you're feeling in your body. It's bringing in a noticing of your taste, touch, smell, all the things, but what feels good? How can I bring in more of what feels good? How can I allow myself to be supported with that? And so, because of the teacher I had, Dr. Kimberly Rose Pendleton,
I love
she is, I adore her. Everyone, go check her out. She was my first coach, and she does everything through a lens of pleasure. And I think I'm so grateful that she was kind of my entrance to the coaching industry and to the healing. As I mean, I tried therapists before, and nothing against therapy, it absolutely has a time and a place. Fully support everyone going to therapy. For myself, though, I couldn't feel safe enough to actually get to the work I needed to get to. And so having this lens of pleasure allowed me to slow down, allowed me to just be and be able to look at those things finally. That's what started changing everything. So that's why I'm so here for pleasure and sensuality and the sexuality piece. I think honestly, that's where most of our shame lies. That is the last place most people talk about. And while we still are holding shame, while we are still hiding parts of ourselves, we're still staying small. We're
Mhm.
still pushing away pleasure that we're allowed to have in our lives. And so that's why sexuality has always been really interesting to me. And I think also it was one of the first places I was able to feel vulnerable. I got involved in the BDSM community. And there is so many rules and it's so communication focused, so consent focused. It was one of the first places I could actually feel safe. And so that kind of also lended itself to the sexuality piece. So,
I'm obsessed with you. Thank you for thank you for opening up and sharing that, because it is one, just moving through, you touched on something really big, that with sexual assault or with some type of trauma, with some type of barrier to entry that comes into our vortex, right? It's like something happened, let me protect. Let me
yeah,
protect. But then when we're in protection, we're also not fully feeling, you know, and then we get to this space, and I know we're in the same mastermind, and I talk about like being conscious in this breakup right now and how much it hurts and how much, but how beautiful that is. And we've kind of spoken about that. And you said that like with your grandfather, it's like when we can actually hold the capacity in our nervous system to know when we're leading with pleasure, we can also handle the dark. Like it's not avoidance. We're not playing this like lukewarm in the middle, you know, being afraid of our shine and our, you know, shadow. Like it's sitting in there being like, both of these are a beautiful mixture to the
yeah,
soul, and that we can actually use them. Same with BDSM, right? Like there's this tension, there's this heat, there's this thing, and this like orgasmic pleasure. Like it has these two kind of dynamics. When we can learn to regulate the nervous system to be like, oh, this is safe. Like this is a safe expression of my pain. This is a safe expression of my pleasure. Because there's also and I would love to hear your insight of this, because it's the shame of having too much pleasure. Like if I have too much space in my day, that like human brain comes through being like, you're not supposed to be enjoying it this month. Like you should get into a schedule right now that's more tight and more hustle and more, you know, masculine paradigm kind of thing, where it's like
yeah,
we lean towards pain being this trophy on a wall and pleasure being this don't do too much of that, because then you're a glutton, then you're this, then you're whatever. And it's like, speak to me about that, and like how you would like work with clients on that, because I see that with myself. I'm like, oh, you took, like even this morning I like was journaling, and I was like, I took the weekend off of work, which I rarely do, but I was just like, I feel like playing this weekend and like going and having fun and like staying out too late and doing whatever the hell my heart desired, but like
I love it.
waking up being like,
Oh,
oh no, like you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to feel like giddy in the morning. You're supposed to be stressed and angry and things like that. It's like, why do we do that as humans? And like, how do we start to shift out of that
ah.
mentality?
So, one of the places I work with my clients with a lot from the beginning is identity. And identity is so deeply intertwined to how we experience pleasure. So, everyone has a different experience of this, but there are some themes that unfortunately are pretty universal. And so, just like a brief aside, any identity is all the different lenses that you come to life with. So intersectionality. So your race, your religion, your upbringing, any trauma you experienced, experiences in school, all of these things put together inform how you exist as a human. So some of these overarching themes, excuse me, that we all deal with: white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism. These are these systems of oppression that are interwoven into how we experience life. And so, this whole we must work super hard, put in all these hours a week. You know, the 40-hour work week only started with Henry Ford. Like, that's not like what it's so arbitrary. It is so arbitrary. And so, when it comes to this work, there's this in the capitalist system, in order to get to the vacation, you have to work this hard, but you're always working for someone. And that someone, unfortunately, in this paradigm, is usually trying to pay you as little as possible for the work you do. And so it's this kind of like fight, fight, fight to get to the work, to pay it off. And then like you multiply that by systems of oppression, and it becomes that much harder. And so, first, there can be an idea that work is the ultimate and we only get pleasure as a reward for work because that's so built into our society. Religion can also very much be an added layer on this. Now, I will preface this and say, while I study the impacts of religion on sexuality in my graduate studies and that, I didn't grow up in a religious household. So this isn't my native experience. But I know when people come to me and they have been taught their entire lives that sex is only for procreation, that it is a sin to feel lust, any of these things, and gluttony is a sin, like that is indulgence. That is luxuriating. That is pleasure. And so we have all these barriers trying to prevent us to experience this pleasure. So it really has to start from a place of unpacking those and recognizing, how does this exist within me? How do we unpack this? And how do I come to a new understanding? Where do my own values lie underneath all of that? What feels good to me and good in my body? And once we can start unpacking those things, it's like, okay, let's give ourselves permission. Let's notice that pleasure actually does like from a scientific perspective, it soothes our nervous system. It's getting ourselves in our body, it's establishing that mind body connection. So it literally physically helps us mentally, emotionally. It helps us on all these levels to dive deep and do the healing work, to actually enjoy our lives. Because, like, this is the other thing that I tell everyone, and it's like, you are the leading actor of your life. No one else is living your life for you. When you are exhausted and spent, is that how you want to look back on your life? Like when we're 90 years old, sitting in bed? Or do you want to tell your grandkids epic stories of how you share things with your friends, of how you experience community, of how you did that ridiculous thing, that crazy thing that was just for you, that everyone's kind of jealous of? You know, I think we need to reframe how we actually view what life should be, because we don't need to be in this constant grind. And I mean, like I shared at the beginning of this episode, like things are kind of chaotic and I have to keep coming back to this. Like, this is how so much of society exists. And what I am here for, what I believe in, is rewriting that, is creating a feminist economy where we pay people exceptional salaries, where they get all the vacation they want, where they can actually feel good in their lives, feel good about the work they're doing. And I actually, like, I have so many models of this existing in a successful business model. Like, it doesn't have to be the antithesis of capitalism, although many people I know would like that. But we can still have this kind of functional society where people are actually enjoying their lives and have enough money to support their kid as a single mom or whatever it is. And well, I'm getting all up on my high horse here, but I just like
I love
we
it.
get to change this.
I love it. It's so true though,
And
because
it starts with pleasure.
it's one of those things though. Like I can even feel my brain going back to times when, you know, hustling, still struggle with it, still have like PTSD from the struggle, still think that's the only way to do it since that's how business 1.0 was built, and like no friends, no time for dating, no things like that. And then sitting here being like, wait, like I get to build a business based on when I'm 97 and I look back being like,
Mm-hmm.
damn kid, you fucking did it. Like all of that kind of stuff, instead of being like, you're alone and you don't like, what was all of that worth, you know, at the end of the day? Like you lost your health, you lost these kind of things. And what's coming fresh to me and I kind of want to dive into is that need for control, right? Like we need to control things. And if we're controlling things, we get this like dopamine hit. And it means, Tony Robbins, 6 Human Needs, all that kind of stuff. Like the certainty is through this control aspect. Whereas like pleasure is kind of uncertain. You have to go explore these things, like your sexuality. You have to be able to like sit in a bedroom with yourself or with someone you care about to be like, I actually have no idea, what this is. Can you explore this safely with me? Can we go about this journey? But, this is where you get like body dysmorphia. This is where you get eating disorders because you're sitting here being like, I actually don't think I'm allowed to have pleasure. So let me cut out gluten, dairy, soy, lectins, all the kind of foods, no sugar, no coffee, no whatever. Like, and you're sitting there being like, what is that root of control and how can we shift that paradigm, regulate ourselves in a sense to be like, oh, it's okay. Like, how can I start to explore this part of myself in a free way that would, I don't know, I don't really know exactly how I'm trying to phrase it, but I hope you're picking up what I'm trying to put down. It's like, how do I do the certainty within the uncertainty of pleasure?
Yeah, so like how do we get out of that constant
Mhm,
battle to have control and be able to like open a little?
mhm,
So, the reason why we can't, why we strain and pull, I have this like pulling image in my head of pulling for the certainty to try to control our world. And if we control it in this way, people will think we're attractive or we won't be judged or, the guy will like us or whatever it is. Um, that need for control is, you know, trying to make sure we fit into certain boxes. And it's a trauma response. So the trauma response is fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. That can come up in a way where it's like fawning, you're trying to like fit into someone's boxes. It can be freezing in that like you're not stepping forward, you're not saying what you want to say. It comes up in different people in different ways. But I would say those are the most two common, especially in people socialized as women. And so the first thing, the most important thing is an awareness within yourself and to notice when those things are coming up. Because until you can notice that, it's just going to keep happening. And so it's noticing like, is your heart ever starting to race? Do you ever feel pressure on your chest? Or are you really up in your head? Like, when you get that kind of chatter, that anxious chatter in your head of like so many things going on and it can feel a bit frenetic, all of these are kind of a subtle body signal that your sympathetic nervous system is heightened. And when that is heightened, that's essentially when you're in a trauma response. And so that is why we start with tuning into our sensuality. Because with our senses, we notice, oh, I am feeling tightness in my chest right now. Oh, like I feel shaky, or I'm really up in my head, or these thoughts are like chitter chattering. That's ego thoughts going on. That's not actually our body and our body's wisdom. And so in every moment it's tuning in to be like, what is happening in my body right now? If you can just catch yourself for a second, slow down for like 20 seconds, be like, what's happening in my body? And when you notice those reactions, labeling it as that, being like, oh, my nervous system's up right now. This is when you take a couple deep breaths. This is when you maybe massage your thighs, squeeze your arms, bringing yourself into the present. This might be when you make yourself a really delicious cup of hot chocolate just to have something soothing. And so these are all kind of little practices, like a couple deep breaths, squeezing your arms and your thighs, doing like the lion's breath where your tongue is sticking out like the that will start bringing you back. And these are practices that will bring your nervous system back down. And then from that place, that's when you say, okay, what is true? In this moment, do I have to rush around? Do I have to go from here to there to there to there? I'm going to go out on a limb and say 98% of the time, the answer is no. We can slow down. We can choose to experience time in a way like even saying to yourself, I have all the time in the world. Even if you have the same amount of stuff in a day, it can make it feel so much easier on your nervous system. So then bringing this back to the control piece, asking, what, like when you're going into that reaction, noticing, what am I trying to control right now? And is that true? Controlling every single aspect of your diet and not allowing yourself this, that, and the other thing. And maybe being concerned about what this guy is texting or any of these places we freak out, asking, if I am leading myself, if my life is the center of my life, how do I want to proceed? What do I believe underneath all that? What do I choose? Rather than forcing myself into this box of, I will be judged, I will be shamed if I don't do this, asking what would feel good.
Mm.
And that coming back to what would feel good, that's when you're going to start coming back to your desires. That's when you're going to start recognizing what feels true in your body, what feels nourishing, and how we can actually give back to ourselves. And this is how we get to a life that feels really fucking good. And it starts with just really little things. It starts with awareness, it starts with presence in the body.
Mm. Yeah, that's something I always talk about as well. It's just like,
Mhm.
I mean, if you can't catch the bodily signal, we get stuck in trauma loops because we end up doing the habitual
Mhm.
behaviors that have kept us safe for this long, right? So it's like
Exactly.
really walking through like, what does that feel without giving it a label as good or bad. It's like, oh, I'm feeling anxious, but that does not mean like, oh my God, my anxiety is coming back, blah, 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 I have to go control it again. It's like, it's
Yes.
just here to let you know you're not in
Mhm.
alignment right now. And that's okay. That's a beautiful conversation to be having with your body. Like, and then what can you infuse? Like in my phone, I have it's called Laura's dopamine toolkit, because
Love it.
forget like when we're in states of arousal, like pleasure is out the window. And I have a background in an eating disorder and all that kind of stuff, so it will show up for me and like controlling work, controlling food, controlling things. And that's how but you can't, when you're in a state of arousal, it's one of those, your prefrontal cortex is like, honey, like let's go, and like is not there. So it's like, let me put it in my phone to remind me what gives me pleasure right now, to put my feet in the grass, to go get sun on my face, to go take a warm bath, to have like a sexual Sunday, like with myself, like to really get into the body and explore that. And so I'm wondering, like, as you were tapping into these things, what were your, you know, beginning stages? I know you said you worked with your mentor, but what was that process like of shattering your self-protection mechanisms that you've had since the early years and stepping into this self-embodiment?
It was, sometimes I hesitate sharing this because I went like real intense real fast because I knew it was me. I knew I needed to change something. So the first coaching package I ever did, it was 10K for 6 months on a 40K a year salary. Like it was terrifying. But I knew in an instant, like I got off the call and I was like, cried for 24 hours because I had to do it. And I committed every Saturday for 6 months, literally only to this work. And it started slowly, um, for the first like month, maybe. And it was learning to attune to my senses at first. And then once I did, it was a bit of the floodgates opened. And suddenly I was feeling, the depths of grief, of, you know, the trauma of the girl I lost when that happened, of who I used to be. It was anger at an abusive ex who I ended up with when I was at my absolute lowest. It was frustration that it took me a decade to get to this place. And it was a lot of feeling all the feels. And what I learned, and why this body safety piece is so important, is it allowed me to actually go to those places and cry for hours and then be like, okay. Because here's the thing, our emotions are inherently safe. There is nothing dangerous in an emotion. When we are able to create safety for ourselves and hold ourselves in that, we can go to these places and it can be on the floor, rolling around, crying, sobbing, and you're fine. And then you get up 2 hours later or 1 hour later or whatever, and you're like, okay, gonna watch some TV. And like, we have such immense capacity to move in and out of these states. And that's a thing I think is sometimes forgotten, is that we actually can experience 18 different emotions in like 20 minutes or less. And we can move in and out of them with ease, especially when we have that body piece. So for me, it was really hard. And I started kind of a little bit before the pandemic and then moving into the pandemic. So I had a whole lot of time on my own to go into these things. Because also my job, like, obviously we weren't in there and I didn't really have anything to do at home. So I'm really grateful for that time. And I think the one thing I want to say is you, to your listeners, like, if this is something that you are curious, like, what if I open Pandora's box? Like, what happens if I go here? First, like, you are the master of your own body. You get to learn how to recognize what you feel and find someone to help you who will honor your body, who will honor your experience. And then you get to go through at a pace that feels good to you. And that might be guns a-blazing, all speed ahead because you have found a safety in your body. It might be going little by little. And whatever your pace is perfect. So, yeah.
I love it. And the one key thing that I think you touched on right at the beginning was just you took ownership, right? Like it's
Mhm.
one of those things where it's like, I feel like we put ourselves in these boxes very often where it's like, someone come fix this for me. I feel this void. Let me go a date to feel this void. Let me go drink to go feel this void. Let me go, overwork or do these kind of things to fill this one kind of void. And what I'm hearing from you, it was just like, I'm the key holder of this, and although I don't know what box this is going to open or where this is going to lead, I feel the scratch within my, solar plexus, within my heart. Like I feel it there. So now I'm going to safely go and explore these kind of things. And that is the key element of life, I believe, where it's like we have to be able to sit there and be like, okay, I know this is different. I know this isn't something I learned in school necessarily. I know this isn't something we talked about around the family dinner table. Like, this isn't something my friends even really know about. But for me, this sense of sexual pleasure, of having this lead me, of having this, like, let me tap into how many senses I can as often as I can, so I can really get into my body in the present moment, can feel terrifying. And at the same way, it's the way to navigate life. So pleasure does lead you. And at the end of the day, leading to that 97-year-old self being like, yes, my little chicken nugget self, good job. Like we did that. And so my follow-up to all of that is, how do you, if someone it doesn't have the capacity of COVID and what have you, and they're in that kind of stuff, and they're in their standard 9 to 5 corporate job or what have you, how do you infuse more pleasure into that? Right? Like would that kind of aspect be? Is it going out to eat and doing certain things? Is it setting your office up in a certain way? Is it doing this kind of stuff with your partner? Like, what would that conversation be with someone?
Well, first, I think it can be any of those things. But what I would start with any person is starting so much smaller than that. I think sometimes we think it has to be these like grandiose life changes, and it's not. It's, looking up from your screen, looking at your plant, and feeling your chair underneath your thighs. It's slowing down for a couple breaths. It's asking yourself the question, how can I bring in 5% more pleasure? Maybe that's getting a new thing of, excuse me, a new thing of tulips on your desk each week. That costs $7 from the convenience store down the road. Maybe it is having your perfect special latte on the way to work and just being really intentional with how you consume it. With a partner, maybe it's setting aside 10 minutes when you first get home, making your first kiss last for like at least 20 seconds. Just that. Like, it can be these small little movements. And this is life. The beauty in life is in the small things. It's in how we notice our presence. It's not in these grandiose, crazy gestures. It's in, maybe you're on some crazy romantic vacation to Venice and you're staying in the most luxury hotel, but the fact that they gave you an extra chocolate on your plate because they liked you, that's the thing you remember, right? Like, it's these little things. So How can you invite in even 1% more pleasure into your day to day? How can you just slow down the moment and use your senses? And that's what I would start with everyone. And those little changes, they might lead to bigger changes because you'll notice, I'm noticing my body, I don't feel good in this place. And that might lead to a job change, which might lead you to meeting new people, which might lead you to falling in love with someone wonderful. It's a ripple effect. But we start small. We start with tuning in so you can build that foundation of being able to know what's happening inside of you.
I love that. That was something, my first thing was like savoring my coffee in the morning. I was like, stop rushing to get to your laptop, to do the thing. You're your own boss. What are you doing? Like sit and savor your coffee even for 4 seconds and being able to sit there. And from there, you're spot on, because then that helped me. Like now I have this rule that no matter what, like I always plate my food. Like even if it's takeout, anything, it always has to be plated. And like it stemmed from there. And that's what helped heal my eating disorder. Because it was like, now we're respecting your body. Like we're slowing down and we're feeling the body, as opposed to just being so reactive and having this dysmorphia and not knowing what she actually feels, or when she's hungry, or when she wants something. Like it was that kind of dynamic where it's like, if I look back and I think about it, it was like savoring my coffee in the morning. Because you also go that other spectrum, right? Where it's like, I'm doing quote unquote all the things. I'm checking all the check boxes of like, okay, I, had self-pleasure today. I meditated, I did some yoga, I did this, I had my coffee, I did the things. And you're sitting there and all of a sudden you're like, and I still feel like a void is in my chest. Like, because I'm not actually feeling it.
I'm so glad that you brought this up because people love their morning routines and I am very anti-morning routine. I've like developed this over the I used to love a morning routine. I even used to teach on it once upon a time. But the more I have learned about our sensual and sexual experience and how we exist in our bodies, in the morning, like if you have like all the boxes to tick off, so you have like you're the life hacked version of your best self or whatever the morning books preach, you're still just rushing and going through the motions and going from here to here to here to here. I want you to ask, like, what do you like doing in the morning? Do you like meditating for 20 minutes every morning? If so, all the power to you. But if you're like, I'm bored, I hate this, and your mind's just going anyway, maybe a better move would be to go sit on the couch and pay attention to your coffee. Maybe it would be, and so now my mornings, I wake up and I lie in my bed and I feel my sheets and I often set an intention for the day. Like today I want to be super slow. Today I want to have a magical day. Like it's really vague usually, but I slow down in my bed and then I get up and I make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and I actively choose. I'm like, what would feel good in this moment? Sometimes it's journaling, sometimes it's reading, sometimes it's literally just sitting. And on the occasion, sometimes it's working. Sometimes I like writing, like content writing, because I'm inspired. And so I just like, I want to invite everyone to like slow down, tune into your senses, and just like ask this crazy question like, what would feel good to you?
That
It's so rare that we ask that.
I love that question. That's like my new thing since I think the last like 6 or so-ish months has been like, instead of just jumping out of bed and doing this, like at 6 a.m. we have to do this, at 7 a.m. we have to do this, 8 a.m. like that is very much that's where my nervous system feels safe, because I'm very much quote unquote type A, or I was very much quote unquote type A. But then realizing any silence of my mind when I would have a gap, like to actually be present, it was like, wait, I'm not actually happy and fulfilled. Like this meditation practice and this stuff that I'm doing, not to say it doesn't work. It's just, it wasn't a pleasure. It was very masculine structure. Let me check my boxes to get this done because I've seen the most successful people in the world. They're doing this. So that must mean I must be doing this. And that must mean I will then be happy if I follow exactly what they do, as opposed to asking the most powerful question when your eyes open. Of course, like 3 gratitude stuff, sure, whatever. But like, then what do I need today? Like, what is that thing that I need today? And like, that's something that's been leading through this heartbreak, is just like, what do I need today to like, it's not going to be the same thing every day. It's going to be, sometimes you do want to just like sit and have a coffee. Sometimes it is, you just want to sit and have a fucking cry. Like you want to lay on the floor and be like, okay. And that doesn't
Yeah.
mean like you're never going to get off that floor. It's like, you're just being a human. And like, can you trust that the human needs to live in order for that leader and that authority to step forward, you know, and to find the basis of this conference, the pleasure in it all, right? And like, can you lead yourself through your day in that pleasure?
Yeah, and one thing I want to kind of pick up on to build on this, when you were talking about like the more masculine structure and the more feminine, this is something I also sometimes think we get a little confused, is that it has to be one or the other. It's either this lean back, floaty, like listen to your body, what feels good to me, or it's the masculine structure. And I just want to say these two are not in opposition. These two support each other. And so, in moments where all I want to do is lean back on the couch and I don't want to work and I don't want to do that, sometimes there is shit to do. So, I want to say, like, we're not bypassing life. Like, you are going to have days where you feel like crap. You're going to have days where you have 8 meetings or whatever, however many meetings. You're going to have days that you have to check certain boxes. And so, in that, can you create a structure? So, like in these times, it's that. But then, from 10 to 11, you have this meeting, but you have an hour break from 11 to 12. So, in this hour, your structure is you get to do what you want. You get to ask your body what you want. You get to slow down. You get to replenish and nourish yourself and your nervous system to hold you in the rest of your day. And I mean, I literally kind of personify my inner feminine and my inner masculine and my dominant and submissive. That's like a whole nother part of it I teach, because it's really fun and really helpful to a lot of people. Um, and essentially, if I want to like be leaning back, if sometimes you're feeling whiny and like a bratty little girl, and you're just like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, da 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 da, and then that's when I'll have like my inner dom come in, being like, go sit on the couch, make yourself a cup of tea. You are going to pause for 20 minutes because the world can wait for 20 minutes. And we can kind of look at these different parts of ourselves. Sometimes all we want is to be looked after.
Mm.
And sometimes we don't have that. And I know, like, when I've gone through my worst breakups, like, I've deeply desired that, just someone to look after me. And so pulling out these different aspects of myself, it can almost feel like that. Like I'm being told to like go take care of myself, but really it's just me telling me to do the things. But it's a way to feel cared for. It's a way to create structure around that feminine energy to relax back into it so that when I am in these moments of what feels good, of slowing down, of savoring my coffee, I can be present with that. And then I have the masculine structure that I return to. And often in my business, I'll have the structure, but then I still want to show up to it in feminine leadership, in my feminine flow. And so, I'm sitting at my computer, but I'm tasting my coffee. I'm being present with it. And then I have the container of my business to hold me while I move within it. Does
Mm.
that make sense?
Oh, 100%. Something my one of my mentors had mentioned. She's like, when it comes to masculine and feminine, it's kind of like when we're driving a car and we have to work the car up the hill, right? And you have to you have to do the car. You have to put your foot on the gas to get out the car. When you get to the top and you're going down the hill,
Mm.
whatever, and you're going around the curves, what does the car do? Even though you take your car foot off the gas, it's still moving, it's still going forward. You don't have to push all the time. And actually, if you kept pushing, you'd probably drive yourself off that damn cliff anyways. Like you have to be able to,
I love it.
understand this whole, okay, you're going to sometimes have your quote unquote baby goddess moments where you're like, blah, 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 I'm not doing anything. This sucks. I'm annoyed. I'm sitting here like, and you throw a tantrum. And then all of a sudden, like your inner mother comes in and she's like, baby girl, like you're safe. How about we get some tea? How about we go get some sunshine on your face? Tap into that dopamine toolkit. Like, what do you need right now so you feel loved and you feel nurtured? Because hustling through it or controlling something else and depriving yourself of more stuff, you're going to have another breakdown tomorrow. And that's probably going to lead to some type of, inflammation or some anxiety or something happening in your body where you're just like shutting off that valve, which is actually life force, and how do we sit in that to be like, okay, where can my inner mother or, submissive dom and things come into this conversation of you're safe in your little tantrum right now, like you're okay, and it's not going to last forever. Let's come in and let's self-soothe with something that lights you up, and that'll take time to figure that out too. Like, and it's not going to be the same. Like what brought me pleasure obviously like before the breakup is very different from what it does now, or like in my old business to what it is now. It's like being able to, you know, invite that conversation of exploring what makes me feel good today. And that may not be the same thing that makes me feel good tomorrow. Like, what is that for you?
And one thing I love how we both were playing with our own languages here, like self-mothering. So like this is also one piece that I think is wonderful about doing the healing work, about looking after yourself, about tuning in, permission to just grab onto what works for you. Because I mean, essentially, like I've heard it with masculine, feminine energy. I've heard it with dominant, and submissive, and reparenting in a more like psychological term. All of these are effectively ways to soothe your inner child and to be with your baby goddess, or like however the term that really resonates with you, like hold on to that and like permission to make it work for you, because again, this is about your individuality. It's about taking ownership and leading yourself. So what do you need and how can you give it to yourself, essentially?
Exactly. And like being able to give it a name, a voice, a system, like something that's not the same as you. Because if you are talking to you and like it's
Exactly.
these two conflicts, then you're like, whatever. Like for me, mine's like a little tiny little chicken nugget voice where I'm like, oh, there she is. Like that's the little one that's like throwing a tantrum right now. Because it can get confusing where it's like if it's my voice and also the person throwing a tantrum has my voice. And I know that kind of sounds like a psychosis, but it does actually work. And it's like sitting there
It
being
really
like,
does.
it really does. You're like sitting there and you're like, okay. Like, and even when like my old partner, like when we would get in like my little needy fits that we all go through, like it's normal. Like I need a little bit more love today, like things like that. It's like using that voice with other people too, to be like, my little baby goddess needs like a little bit more love today, like different kind of moments. And you allow it to be this thing that's not so fucking serious. Cause I feel like the healing journey, we make it so serious. And it's like, it really doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be. And honestly, when we learn how to like bring that awareness in to recognize our baby goddess, our little toddler throwing a tantrum, it's kind of like, oh, you're back.
Yeah.
Hi. There you are, sweetheart. And it like can be like, okay, yeah, you're here and like I feel you. And like I see you and see how you're just just need a little more today. And when you put it outside yourself, it gives you permission to be like, to take the lead, to be able to soothe her with whatever other voice feels good.
Exactly. And that's part of the healing, right? Like when we're having this ego death, quote unquote,
Mhm.
it is
Yes.
that recognition that it does not actually die. It will be a part of us. We are just learning now to be like, okay, thank you for the protection that you've had for all of these years, but we're doing something different now. Like we're choosing a different pathway away from this, self-sabotage or what have you, whatever conversations you want to put around it. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, and I'm not denying that you exist, but I'm also going to sit here and say, we're going a different way. We're infusing more pleasure. We're infusing more joy. We're finding safety within this pleasure. We're going to actually, I know you want to go hustle this thing because that is your old nervous system way of thinking that's going to work. But like, let's actually not do this as like a performance. Let's go do this as a flow and a breath and like a dance with the universe instead of this like let's perform and get our grades and do our things. And even performing in sex, like let me just put on a show for all this shit that's going on. It's like no, like thank you, and like we're gonna move away from
And you can
it.
sit in the back seat and I'm driving.
Exactly. My dear, I've had so fun with this conversation.
Me too. Oh my gosh, I love it so much.
So good. Is there anything else that you want to leave people with?
I mean, I guess just if you have this inclining, if you're inkling, there you go. If you're listening to this conversation and you're like, okay, like I get it, but I like, and there's a trepidation, just know like you are so powerful. There is so much capability and capacity in you to learn this and to hold all this and to find these other aspects of yourself so you can lead yourself, so you can listen into your desires and really create the life you want. And I think if you're like, ooh, like I want more pleasure, like I just want to say sensuality is the shit. And sometimes it gets a bad rep, but when we can bring that part of ourselves, and this goes for all humans, however you identify, because it'll just bring you so much closer to yourself. So enjoy it, have fun with it, don't put so much pressure on it. And yeah, we're here for you if you want some help.
I love that. And like the conversation where it's like, if a conversation like this triggers you, if it's something where it's like this, but it's like, use that as a portal of activation. Like, what is that inviting you to? What shadow have you not witnessed? Because I know for me, this a few years ago was like, they're too into themselves, da, 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 things like that. But it's like, use that as a portal of activation where it's like, why does that feel like it's too much for you? Why does it feel like a shame thing? And start that conversation with yourself or people that you care about. I think that's good.
Absolutely.
So many dear, how
Oh,
people connect with you, follow up, work with you, all the good things.
absolutely. Oh my goodness. Well, I would love to hear from you. I love getting to know like what were your takeaways from this podcast? What did you enjoy? What activated you? Where do you want to explore more? Come send me a DM. I'm at Luxurious Feminine Power on Instagram, and I would love to hear from you. And if you're curious about working with me, come on, hit me up, talk to me in the DMs over there, and we'll get you sorted.
Perfect. And I will put that all in the show notes and all the good things. But thank you so, so much, my dear.
Thank you so much. Oh, I've loved this so, so much. You are so wonderful.